Brilliant, and welcome. We've had a really good response to this, which suggests that we need to be out there telling people more things. So welcome and thanks for giving up your time this afternoon. If you just move on to the next slide, Kate. So I've already been introduced. We're here to talk specifically about the National Nuclear Strategic Plan for Skills today, share its objectives, share its outline. Also talk a little bit about the mechanisms through which the plan is being delivered. I think that's quite important, particularly to those of you that are already in the sector. It's nice to know how and who you need to contact about different things. And we're also going to deep dive into two of the specific projects that we're working on through Lynn and Chris and Goldie's input. So that will come later on in the session. I've already, I think Roger's already said that we've recognised that some of you can't use chat, so please feel free to email questions through to the Cogent Skills address on this slide, and we will try and collate some Q&As after the session anyway for any that we don't get a chance to address, but I'm sure Roger will come on to that later. Yeah, next slide, please, Kate. So the nuclear sector demand, I think it's worth just taking a couple of minutes to think through why we're all here, why the Nuclear Skills Task Force was even thought about and established. So there is a hugely significant skills challenge in the sector. We're currently at about 83,000 of a core workforce, and we need to increase that by 40,000 new jobs, new roles by 2030. And that doesn't take into account the fact that in addition to those new roles, there will be people who will be retiring and leaving the sector for good reasons. So we need to replace those as well. And our estimates suggest that we're probably looking at about well over 100,000 new roles by 2030 in order to meet that target. So quite a significant challenge that we need to meet. So Cogent Skills have been running the nuclear workforce assessment for a number of years, and I think it was back in 2023 that we kind of started to really flag the size and scale of that challenge. And at that point, the task force was set up, sponsored by MOD and DESNZ ministers. And the output of that task force, which took about 6 months, was a funded plan, which was launched on the 24th of March by the Prime Minister, alongside a Defence Command paper and an investment announcement to Barrow. Next slide then, please, Kate. So the skills plan has got four key themes and 15 projects within it. So it's a plan which has 4 chunks of activity covering all their areas of the kind of skills and development agenda. So from sector attractiveness, recruitment, retention, development, etc. We will go through each project today, but at a really high level of detail. Clearly, in this timescale, we can't talk for too long on each, but there are going to be 2 deeper dive elements for you to hear in more detail about. We're actually still not quite yet at the point of contract, which means that we can't really start proper work on this until we are. But we are. Somebody's not on mute. If you don't mind muting, just otherwise it's gonna kind of throw me off scare. Thank you. So for each project we have a project initiation document which outlines all of the key deliverables, milestone dates, etc. And if you are interested in any of the detail, what I suggest is, if you have an NSDB member, that's probably the first point of call. We want to improve the cascade of information through the companies, but if you are struggling to find any information that you need, then feel free to get in touch using that same address that we gave at the start of the session. Yeah, next slide then, please, Kate. So really, this is just a schematic of the same point, just really recognising the fact that there is a sort of a whole kind of sort of phase of activities to go through. The 4 themes are collaborate, deepen, invest, and lead, and I'll walk through each of those in a second. But for as a whole, that system is intending to deliver real strategic benefits, ultimately to address that gap in skills that we've identified at the start of this session. But obviously that's a longer term plan, and short term there'll be other benefits that we'll be trying to illustrate and demonstrate along the way. Yeah, next slide then, please, Kate. So just a little bit in terms of delivery. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on this because I think it is quite important to understand how all this fits together. So if I start in the middle of this slide on the blue sort of middle bit of the slide, this is the sort of delivery layer here. So the ultimate responsibility for the delivery of this plan is the NSEC, the Nuclear Skills Executive Council, which is made up of 15 major nuclear employers and government departments, and they, as CEOs, sit on that board and have sponsored this plan from start to finish and are funding it along the way as well. So ultimate responsibility sits with them. They then delegate that responsibility to the Nuclear Skills Delivery Board, which is a mirror of that NSEC organisation, normally of sort of HR director or learning and development director type people. That board then delegate through nominating people onto what's called a Nuclear Skills Programme Review Group, which is essentially a group which knives and forks through the plan, holds the plan to account, make sure that we are delivering, make sure that we're gaining the benefits that we're anticipating, and unblocks any challenges along the way. So the NSDB and the NSPRG are kind of essentially one group, but it's just a subgroup of that organisation, recognising that the board itself wants to stay quite strategic and not bog itself down with that detail. So that then is delegated to me as programme director to oversee the delivery function, and we do that through 4 programme leads, one of which is here today, at least one of which is here today. There may be others on the call that I don't know about, but Lynn Matthews will be talking later. We'll also having started is Maddie McDonald from Rolls-Royce, and then about to start we've also got Dan Hall from AWE and Jamie Martin from Royal Navy, and the 4 leads and myself are ultimately responsible for making sure that the 15 projects are on time, on cost, on scope, etc. It's worth mentioning the fact that there are 3 other groups, 3 coordinating groups that feed into that delivery structure. One is a group called the Provider Coordinating Body. This is made up of organisations like NSAN, ECITB, CITB, National College, Cogent Skills, and the Nuclear Academics Group. Essentially those organisations who coordinate the wider delivery landscape, so FEHE, training providers, that kind of stuff. So where there is a programme or intervention that needs input from those kind of organisations, then we can coordinate their response through that group. There's also a regional coordinating group. I'll come on to regional hubs in a second, but there's a group that looks at how we deliver the activities in and through the regions and what the commonalities are across the regions and what the differences are as well, and how we feed those with data. And the last piece of the jigsaw, which isn't quite in place yet, is a supply chain coordination forum. This recognises that the NSEC doesn't include all of the members of the supply chain and never could it, but we do want to speak to the supply chain and hear from the supply chain, involve the supply chain in the projects initiatives over time. I think at the moment we're kind of focusing on the core and just getting things up and running and delivering, but we do want to hear from the supply chain. We need to work out how we do that most effectively over the coming weeks. To the right of this diagram then is the support to delivery. This is kind of PMO function. This is strategic support to the delivery structure. So things like labour market intelligence and that kind of thing. These services are currently offered by Cogent. So Cogent will retain the strategic support capability, but will be the PMO will be competed for 25 onwards, so March 25 onwards. So that they support with the contracting, the project management services and everything to this core delivery group in the centre. And then on the left-hand side of the diagram is the government side support. So there is a sector skills team that deal with the business case and funding and all of that kind of stuff to make sure that the plan is ready to deliver, to make sure that all of those mechanisms within government are in place. And they also provide secretariat services to the NSEC. Okay, next slide then, please, Kate. So this is where I'm going to quickly whiz through in as very, very quick time. So it will be a really high level run through. You will get these slides afterwards, and there'll be other opportunities to find out more. But in the first of those four buckets of activity, we talked about Collaborate. So in Collaborate, there are a couple of different initiatives. One I'm not going to talk about because Lynn and Goldie will be talking about that afterwards. That's the National Comms Campaign. The regional hubs, as I've already mentioned, are mechanism recognizing that it's really important that we deliver these national interventions in and through the regions. This is a mechanism to do so, and also to recognize that regions might have unique skills needs that the national plan isn't addressing. So it's a mechanism to address those. Next slide, please, Kate. So then we move into the deepen work stream, which is one of the bigger ones of the plan. Within this, we've got career switchers, which is at the moment a series of accelerator programs designed to bring people in at the mid-career level and address any shortfalls that they have in the most critical professions of the industry. So we're already delivering accelerator programs in some of the most critical skill shortage areas. The next three actually are about just taking on more people ultimately. So doubling intake of apprentices, double intake of graduates, and quadrupling the intake of PhD people, recognizing that the only real way to address this skill gap is by taking on more people. So we'll take on experienced hires through career switchers, and then early careers through these three other work streams. So as part of the charter, which the organisations in the NSEC have all signed up to, they've all committed to taking on more, whether or not they individually necessarily need them right now. They've committed to taking on more on behalf of the sector. Next slide, please, Kate. So I've mentioned the PhD one. The next one then is a graduate bursary program. So recognising that not everybody who would like to join the sector or STEM subjects generally are able to, or maybe people have challenges along the way. This is an industry-wide bursary scheme aimed at providing young people and older people, actually, people who are learning, the support to complete their learning. Maybe it's about actual support for cost of living, maybe it's support for IT equipment or whatever else. But this is a scheme that's going to be accessible to all. Initially supporting 24 candidates, but potentially if people need less, but we could then kind of kind of cover more people with that amount, we could potentially look at increasing that number. Next slide, please. The next one I just want to talk about is the sponsorship scheme. This is actually starting in September this year. This is a phenomenal scheme supporting 50 STEM undergraduates from lower economic backgrounds through their degree, paying their living costs, offering them work experience in the summer holidays, and then giving them a work offer at the end of it. As I say, that does have quite strict economic requirements, but I would urge you to start sharing this. It is on LinkedIn, all over LinkedIn, so please do share and make this available to people you think might be in that boat. Going forward this year, we're having to pick up people who have already applied to university, but maybe in those kind of categories to help them complete their studies and not feel they have to work kind of part-time jobs along the way, which might disrupt their learning. Going forward, we'll be trying to target students who otherwise just wouldn't have done a degree at all, who couldn't afford to do a degree at all. So we'll be working with students in year 12 and 13 to actually encourage them to apply going forward. Sector experts into training, I'm not going to talk about because Chris is going to talk about that after me. So if we move on to the next slide. The next area then is investing. So this is all about investing in different products and initiatives and development schemes across the way. I won't talk about nuclear community because that's also tied into the destination nuclear work that Lynn and Goldie will be covering. But I will just talk about interchange. So this is an opportunity. This is really more on the retention side of the plan, looking at how we can make best use of the people that we have and give people opportunities to second and mobilise across the sector between civil and defence, and really try and encourage people and promote opportunities for people to undertake those types of secondments. Optimising the training landscape is all about how we ensure that the UK's training capability and capacity is sufficient for the increased demand. So it's looking at how we make the landscape more efficient, how we make sure that colleges have spaces where they need to have them, and that we understand the size and scale of the gap there. Next slide, please. And I'm nearly done. So the last theme area is leadership, and this is kind of two leadership programs, again specifically aimed at retention, looking at identifying in the cross-sector leadership scheme those individuals who may be working at a senior level across the organisations, but are ready to perhaps take on exec type roles at some stage in the future, but hopefully could do so in a more kind of rounded sector level approach. So maybe they want to sort of have experience of other parts of the sector rather than just the organisation that they're working to currently. So this will pick up high potential future executives and is a really will really provide excellent opportunities, both taught but also experiential for those people. Similarly, is the Future Leader Scheme. This is designed for people earlier on in their career, but not very, not first job, perhaps second or third job in, not necessarily picking up the sort of people that, the traditional graduate schemes might have done, but just recognising that there are high potential people in the sector who need to develop their leadership skills, and the scheme will provide them that opportunity to do so. And the last one isn't really an initiative in its own right. It's a theme that will spread through all of the other programs that we've talked about. So obviously, equality, diversity, and inclusion is hugely significant to the sector. We've set targets before, but this is about, as well as monitoring and measuring those targets, it's about how we embed ED&I and everything in all of the activities that we've just been talking about. So each one of these work streams will have KPIs to address equality, diversity, and inclusion within them, so that it's more of an overarching theme rather than a specific project in its own right. So I think, next slide, please. I think that's it. I feel like I've rattled through that, but as I say, this is really a taster session. We'll very much be looking at how we can do this more in the future, whether this is the right mechanism, whether which areas you want to hear more about, and do progress updates as we go. So we'll be sending out something after this webinar to ask how best to communicate this with you on an ongoing basis. But for now, I'll pause and hand the baton over to the next person. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Appreciate that. So whistle stop tour in just over 10 minutes of a lot of activity. So mindful of time, but Lynn, you're up next, if that's okay. And you're just on mute, Lynn.
Sorry. Next slide, please. Oh, and the first slide. Okay, so we've heard about the size and scale of the challenge. This is really about what Destination Nuclear's role is and where it fits within that. Becky talked about collaboration and deepening the workforce as part of the roadmap. This firmly sits in that area. What's worth saying at this point is, we're completely aware that there's loads of brilliant work going on around workforce development, attracting people into the sector. What Destination Nuclear does is create an umbrella over that as a nuclear household brand because of its mass market reach, and will hopefully be able to amplify nuclear as a great career choice, but also help with this ED&I that Becky mentions, on where a lot of organisations, we've all got this ambition to create a workforce that is more reflective of the UK population, a more diverse workforce. This will hopefully help complement the work that's already going on. So if we quickly touch on the challenge, it was to make nuclear a household brand, and to attract and maintain the future workforce. So next slide, please, Kate. So on the 12th of February, we launched the first ever cross-sector nuclear recruitment campaign. So as Becky referenced earlier, this was across defence, civil and government for the first ever time. And on that day, you would have seen, if you had noticed them, billboards in stations, bus stops, social media, Spotify, on the radio. You know, it became a real sort of powerful mass marketing effort. All of this would lead to, or did lead to, a website which then educated around the nuclear sector from a human point of view, from a people point of view, rather than just about the products and services we offer. It was from a human experience. Had information around skills, which then drove people to a portal which Goldie is going to go through shortly, which then showcased the whole array of jobs that are available across nuclear, and also encouraged people to apply. So yes, this happened in February. It was fairly whirlwind in from instruction to action, if you like. And what I would like to say is it's ever evolving. So next slide, please. So as I say, we created it's really, really important right from the off to think about the customer in this, the target audience in this, and create a user journey that attracted people through curiosity and drove them through that route to the portal. The whole setup is underpinned by something that will remain relevant, flexible, agile. So what's really important to say, and Becky mentioned labour market intelligence earlier, this is a demand-driven model. So this is all about collectively what the organisations are needing in terms of demand. It's reflective of what the supply is in particularly with this at the moment in the UK, and where the gaps are, and then where the critical gaps are. So this model will always be led by, however brilliant the input is, it will deliver brilliant output. So I think that's really important to say. Next slide, please. So if we take a bit of a step back, what we recognise, and it was mentioned about strategy, what we recognise is, although you see a campaign with a website and a portal and a user journey with an aim to move people quicker from attraction into employment, that's the front end, if you like. We recognised quite early that this is absolutely an end-to-end industry effort. So we can create the greatest promise in the world through storytelling, through positive messages, through positive imagery and experiences. But what's really important is when people apply, if the job descriptions don't look great, if the recruitment process isn't as expected, if the onboarding process, you know, isn't as good as it could be, and actually the employee value proposition, which is when you join an organisation, is it as we set it out? There could be a problem with hemorrhage through that. So this is an absolutely hand-holding effort that we very early on created a campaign, and it'll be in the link actually, the original video we created to start organisations really thinking about how to get ready for destination nuclear. So the early work was actually really targeted at the sector more than the end user, if you like, more than the people that we're trying to recruit. So the partners that came on board early with us, the recruitment teams, the HR teams, the comms teams, worked endlessly in partnership with us to ensure that there's this really seamless, as much as we can, end-to-end experience at the start. This is only the start of it. This is going to have to absolutely continue and continue to evolve. But I thought it was really important to show that there's a national strategy behind this, which is a really good example of true collaboration. So next slide, please. Right, that is the Get Ready campaign video that we're not going to play. Oh, we are going to play. We weren't going to play now. because I know some people might not access it as easily as you can. So that will be in the link. So just let's have a quick look. Now, the first phase was absolute proof of concept. It was aimed at mid-career switchers, and we went through 4 critical skills areas. All of these were given to us by the collective labour market intelligence that we've got. So the 4 test critical skills areas were project controls, were safety case engineers, were rad protection and welding. So what was meant by that is we did some big, broad marketing campaigns, and then down particularly various social routes and some of the advertising, we went more nuanced into those areas and sort of through the portal drove people to looking at some of those areas of critical gaps. So we've got the capability within this system to be able to quite quickly, because it's digitally, where the gaps are showing, we can emphasize certain areas to help organisations fill those gaps. But if we look at the success of the first phase, although we have a lot of micro results, you know, how many clicks, how much time was spent on various parts of the website and the portal, so that we can gather all that intelligence, not only to look at our successes, but actually look at lessons learned and how we can evolve and make it even better. So we've got a lot of data on that, and the organisations that are involved have had that as feedback, so they can develop their side of the bow tie, if you like, as well. But if we take it up to a macro level, there were 4 real key areas that are worth looking at. So the campaign, yes, that had impact. You know, we saw a lot of attention on it. People are talking about it. We're getting a lot of results through the campaign, but also we've already seen great candidate success. Nearly 50,000 and more actually candidates has visited the website. 5,500. This was actually taken in the end of the first phase, 31st of March. Candidates have started their application process, and you know, we're getting stories of several of those already into employment, and over 4,000 different positions have been viewed. And this is a really important point, because the purpose of it was not to drive them all to the same positions that people would currently look at. We want them to understand that there's a whole array of jobs and opportunities within the sector. So that was really important. And quite interestingly, where Becky said 40,000 is the ultimate target, well, hey, that's 10% of jobs already being looked at through the system. So great, you know, indication that this process is something that's being used and successful, that, you know, in an area we can build on. The story that I've already told through the bow tie actually is it shows real evidence of true sector collaboration. You know, one of the first things that's actually been put as a tactical thing that we've been able to collaborate around. 26 organisations have already piloted and invested in this. There's more to come. We're working on that to see how we scale things up. So yeah, we you know, great example of the fact that we can work to a shared goal. And then, you know, fourthly, it's created government advocacy, you know, a great partnership there. There's been eyes on us, ministers, and, you know, the various sectors in government to really sort of work together as a nation to how we address this critical skills gap that Becky really articulated well at the start. So next slide, please. So I've touched on this really, but I think it's a really, really important point. We sort of started with the end in mind with this, making sure that whatever we create and whatever we evolve is flexible. It's responsive to how the sector works and the pace it's going to work. We're not going to be stuck with something that we can't maneuver. So it's important that the product is flexible, and also it's aspirational. You know, some things we'll get right, some things we may not, but we're going to be, you know, brave. We're going to try new channels, you know, catch up TV, TikTok, what, you know, what's going to really work for this audience, and what can we really bring to the party of the organizations that are already really trying to play in this space. So, you know, those things are really important. And also we want to work rapidly, you know, maintain high momentum, keep it relevant, keep it fresh. So it's really important, again, that the organizations are constantly reviewing their microsites and holding up their end of the bargain. And actually at the end, I'll talk about how you can get involved as individuals as well. So next slide, please. So yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out and just share with you. These were the organisations that believed in us right at the start and invested early and have been a really good and key part of the first phase. And as I've put there, you know, it's still growing. So, you know, we're creating a model that hopefully is going to reflect, as Becky said earlier, supply chain and beyond that. So just wanted to shout out to those really great organisations that helped us so far. And then next slide, please. So I've just added this in case you want to, immediately after this, you can follow the QR code, which will take you straight to the site. And then the call to action before I hand over to Goldie is on the next slide. Is that actually, you know, this is our strapline for the campaign, and it's aimed at the target audience, but essentially this is also, going back to the bow tie, aimed at us as the sector. So, you know, if I get asked to how you can get involved, please follow on social media, comment, you know, be an advocate as much as you can, share your ideas with us. But also, if, you know, Becky said 83,000 currently in the sector. If 83,000 people individually recommended somebody to apply, you know, look where we go with that. So yeah, let's help those that aren't considering nuclear to consider nuclear. And now I'm going to hand over to Goldie, who's going to just give you a great insight into the careers portal and how it actually works and how a user could navigate through. So, Goldie.
Thanks, Lynn. Kate, I'm just going to try and share my screen now, so just let me know when it's coming through okay.
Got it.
All good?
Yep, all good.
Okay, thanks very much. Afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the careers portal now and a little bit of a show around the site. It's worth mentioning that although this is a separate website to Destination Nuclear, that's just a consequence of the function that it provides as a jobs board for the nuclear sector. Hopefully you'll see, looking at the site, that it's clear branding and messaging between the two. So what I've got on the screen at the moment is the landing page for Destination Nuclear careersportal.co.uk. And that features the common logo at the top, images which show the breadth of the different areas in both civil and defence which the nuclear sector covers, and the tagline here, whatever you can do nuclear. So that recognises the number of transferable skills that are relevant to the opportunities available within the sector. Moving down here, we've got a 3-box grid. And this is what shows the different types of opportunities that we are trying to showcase. So careers for those experienced hires and career switchers that Becky mentioned earlier, those that already have skills which are applicable to the sector. Apprenticeships and graduate roles for those looking to undergo training to get into nuclear at the early career stage. And then also secondments for personnel looking for opportunities to for temporary lateral movements within the sector. And it's worth noting that even though it doesn't highlight it here, there are secondment opportunities listed on the site. What we're working to try and do is refine the filters from the various job boards that these positions are pulled through from, so that the filters show them under this banner. This scrolling banner below shows the different organisations we've been working with so far, the 26 that Lynn mentioned. are early adopters, and the intent for this site is to have, you know, a one-stop shop for all the opportunities in the sector. So we've got those ambitions to onboard as many organisations as possible, and we're hoping to have some significant progress on how that's going to be achieved in the short term. So from the outset, we've worked to ensure that we've got a level playing field. There's quite a wide range in terms of the size of some of the companies of our stakeholders, the number of opportunities that they've got available. So the next 3-box grid we've got below is set up so that it will showcase at least one opportunity from each of those stakeholders, regardless of their size. And that feature is repeated as well when we come onto the search function in a minute. Under each of the different headings, there are also there's at least one position from each of the stakeholders that's available. Moving on now, so at the top here, I'm going to move across to browsing the different opportunities available. The second bar down, I can actually filter that by those experienced hires, apprenticeships and graduates and secondment opportunities, but I'm going to go on all opportunities. And you can see at the moment we've got 1,563 positions listed. On the left-hand side, we've got the search function to allow users to search by the job title, the type of opportunity, which company it's with, or the location. And you can also use a keyword search to filter that down even further. On the organisations hub, we've got an A to Z of the different companies we've got on board at the moment. If you click on any of these company logos, or in fact anywhere else on the site, it will take you to a microsite for that company. So just select one at random. So Babcock, for example. So these microsites have been incorporated for 2 reasons. So firstly, they provide additional information about that company in terms of their overview, what their role is in nuclear, career information and company principles, such as the ED&I that Becky mentioned. And secondly, this portal is intended to promote the whole sector. So rather than having links to individual company sites, we want to keep the traffic in one place. So having these microsites allows us to do that rather than being redirected. We've got a supporting organisations section of the organisations hub. At the moment, we've only got the National Careers Service for England on there. We're in discussions with the other devolved nations to get their equivalent services loaded onto the site, and we're also open to incorporating other appropriate organisations to provide additional information for people looking for careers in nuclear. Got the news section. This is showcasing key updates and events occurring with the sector. It gives us a platform so we can promote jobs fairs, careers events, and upcoming opportunities for engagement. It's slow, I'm not sure why that's loading so slowly, apologies. But trust me, there's some really good articles on there. I'll move on because I know we're short of time. At the moment, the portal has got an option to create your own profile. There's no requirement to do this in order to search for or indeed apply for opportunities, but what it does do is gives the ability to save favorites. So I've got a little folder here, just some random positions that I've selected. But over the next couple of months, what we're hoping to do in phase 2 is launch an improved user profile. What that will do will allow people to upload their CVs, self-declare skills and areas that they're interested in working in, and also express interest in positions. We're also going to add a facility so that companies will have their own login to the site. That will allow them to search through candidates, express their interest in return, and this will also provide access to key metrics about their performance within Destination Nuclear and how much engagement they've had. Really proud of our progress so far. Lynn mentioned some key statistics. 5,500 potential applications to join the sector started from Destination Nuclear, 4,000 different positions, which is 10% of that 40,000 we're hoping for by 2030. So we want to maintain this momentum, grow the number of stakeholders and make it a truly sector-wide one-stop shop and enhance that user experience. I'll hand back to Roger now for the next session of the webinar. I'll look for any questions specifically for the portal in the chat, and thanks for your time.
Excellent. Thanks, Rob. Goldie, thanks very much for that. Thanks to Lynn as well. Thanks for keeping to time, because I know Chris is joining us on a lunch break. So much appreciated. A reminder to keep the questions coming through in the chat and to the panelists as well. Speakers, if you feel free to dive in there and pick up any questions as we go along. Chris, over to you.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So as trialed by Becky, I'm going to bring to life a little bit the Sector Experts programme and do my best to give you an overview of why that project stream exists, what's been done so far, and what are we going to do next. So just some headline comments really to start with, and that is if 40,000 new employees are needed in the next 6 years, it follows that there is likely to be a need for more teachers, trainers, etc. Much of the education sector in the STEM realm is already under pressure. So this project, this strand comes out of that very obvious issue, in that unless we find more people willing to take various training, teaching, educational roles, we are going to be in a pickle by way of developing the talent pipeline. So we need more trainers. This project is really, and this work is about making it easier for people who have an interest in this, who are in industry roles presently, to find a much easier route in to roles that suit them, and also access support to make that process as easy as possible, and the reality of supporting learners in its many forms as straightforward as it can be. Arguably, and I do work in this sector, so I speak from experience, but arguably, if we put it that way, the existing market for matching demand and supply, teachers broadly described to teaching roles broadly described, is for anyone who's not taking a formal route, is complex. It can be a bit bewildering and off-putting. It's often quite binary. You've got to do all of X or all of Y, and it's often ad hoc and happens almost by accident. The relationships with employers generally is somewhat informal in this regard and a bit disjointed, and we do have quite an outflow of staff, certainly from the FE sector, into employers, taking up, in simple terms, better paid industry roles and moving out of teaching, which of course amplifies the problem really. And to give you a sense of that, the average teaching salary in FE is £37,000 per annum. So if you think of nuclear roles in industry, you can I'm sure you can see the challenge immediately there. It's also a big leap from a standing start to formal, often university validated teacher training. So that's another challenge as well. So what have we done so far? Very quickly, we've tried to simplify that market and establish a process to, secondly, encourage collaboration with a wider stakeholders, employers, industry representatives, and so on, and then offer some toolkit type practical support for anybody who's willing to take this on. So that takes me into the next slide, if I may please, Kate. This is a PDF, so you might not be able to see the text as well as you might, but if you can see the headlines, that's fine. So this is a laying out of the landscape, if you like, where on the left-hand side we have some pretty big handfuls of where people might be as sector experts or industry practitioners at the moment. And they're kind of, it may be that they're considering a secondee arrangement, so their employer is willing to second them into a training role. It could be that they are retired, or they could be that stepping down in their career. It could be a career change. I've done this now and I want to do that. It could be an in-company training role, or it could be somebody just out of general interest. You know, instead of doing five-a-side on a Tuesday, I teach safety case engineering at my local college. So it's a broad church, and we're just trying to codify where people might come from to make it easier to digest their particular needs. If you then follow me over to the right-hand side, what type of teaching and training roles exist? Well, that could be a fairly traditional lecture teacher role. It could be in the world of training and instructing. Welding might be an example of that. It could be somebody who wants to act as an assessor. Lots of countries in Europe have a formal arrangement whereby employers are obliged to provide formal assessors, certainly in the apprenticeship realm. It could be coaching and mentoring, which is a really important role for lots of apprentices. It could be guest speaking, and it could be outside of the kind of direct contact with students and learners and apprentices, and it could be in the world of curriculum development, colleges, universities, are always keen to get some direct input into the programs that we develop and how they're delivered, and industry expertise is very welcome in that regard. So that's how we think of the market and the system. And then if you consider the middle bit, this is largely what we've done so far in the project, and that's to develop a practical toolkit and guide. More on that in a second. To develop a boot camp. Everywhere I turn, there's a boot camp these days. So here's another one, and that's to provide a bridge for people who are in the left-hand category, wherever, into preparation for the world of teaching. Teacher training, that's obviously a very important part. Teaching education is a heavily regulated sector, quite rightly, so there is a need for teacher training at some point, but we're looking to, be a bit more sophisticated in where that fits in the program, and then lots and lots of good practice and support so that people new to this can learn from people who have been there, seen it, done it, and can give them some very practical advice. I can speak from personal experience. Spending 2 hours with 18-year-olds can be quite a long 2 hours if you don't have any kind of framework in which to operate within. Next slide, please. Okay, so to finish then, you can see in that little table there what we're doing next. So I'm going to just give you some examples of the toolkit via the link in a second. But before I do that, we're in the planning and preparation stage for pilots now. So we've done the development of the work, the system, the model, how the world is at the presently, the toolkit, etc. We now want to pilot that. We're planning that over the summer months, and then we're looking to pilot that in the northwest, southwest, and east, and engage employers and some willing participants who are sector experts currently to work with us in a safe space, if you like, to pilot our approach and test and iterate, and then review and evaluate that with a view to going national. So, Kate, if you wouldn't mind opening the toolkit link, which is where I will finish. So colleagues in the FE world have worked over the sort of the spring months in developing a repository. I have to be careful how I say that word, repository of materials, and that's within a Padlet, which is just a way of collating and storing information in the cloud. And you can see there across the top that we've got 4 different sections. So there's the information gathering phase. If you, an employer, an industry representative, has a vague kind of interest in this and would like to find out more, currently your options are largely to email some general email address at a college or university and see what happens. So we want to provide a much richer, more helpful landing point to gather information around this. If your interest is piqued, then you might want to explore and discover what that's about. And there are an awful lot of links there, put in a nice kind of accessible, interesting way, curated very carefully so that they're useful, wherein people can kind of find out more and get a bit of a better understanding of what we mean and what we're trying to do. Then back to my point about the reality of being in a role in education, we've developed some practice support and development. So Kate, if you wouldn't mind just opening that engaging learners resource. Thank you. If we had more time, and please, you've got the link, so do have a wonder about these. But these have been put together by seasoned practitioners in FE and HE. And this is under the topic of engaging learners. An hour can be a long time if you don't have materials to hand and in an engaging manner. So this is a whole range of easy to use technologies often, but approaches as well that work. You can test ones that suit you. It's a pick and mix kind of idea. And our program and what we'll be piloting is how colleges can help people get a portfolio of resources and approaches that work for them, rather than having to go through 2 years of teacher training in order to pick those up. So if you come back out, please, Kate. That's it. Thank you. And then so that's where we've got to. And an important part of the program is to have a stakeholder management program so that employers and other industry representatives and bodies are aware of what we're doing. They can see how relevant it is to them. There's a way of contacting people like me and saying, this is interesting. I can see the problem. How do we engage and how do we promote this within our colleagues? That is me. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Chris. Excellent, much appreciated. Thanks everyone for sending through questions in the chat. I know we've had a couple of questions on emails too. Chris, I'll probably start with you if that's okay, because I know you're on a hard stop. But there's a question around how easy or difficult it is to become a part-time teacher or trainer at the moment.
Well, if you're very determined, you can do it. And lots of people get into the further education sector, less so, I think, higher education, through kind of almost informal routes and personal contacts. There is a national government supported programme called Taking Teaching Further, which is a funded and bursary-led programme, which is great, and it does work, and colleges use it. But I think the gap between the two things, the very informal and the formal, there is a space that we're trying to step into to make it much easier for people, so that you've got a launch, an arrival place, you've got materials to hand, you've got somebody at a college that can walk you through this and make the whole process much better, sort of frameworked, if you like. Thank you.
Okay. Cheers, Chris. No, thanks for that. Lynn, there's a question for you. Probably this appeared in the chat a couple of times, but people interested in how do they get involved in a Destination Nuclear program? What's the message to people?
So I think I touched on that earlier. From a personal point of view, if you can support our social media campaign, make sure that you are commenting, forwarding, reposting, all of those sort of things. That's really important. Also, useful to let us know what events you're at, any ideas around where you think are useful channels, always interested to hear that. But then from a company point of view, as I've said, we are scaling up. We are looking at including many more companies in various ways. So bear with us while we develop that model, but let us know if your organisation's interested in becoming part of Destination Nuclear.
Excellent. Thanks, Lynn. Much appreciated there. So any questions that have come through in the chat that we haven't able to answer in this session, I think we've agreed that the panelists will be online to come back with answers after the show, so to speak. There's one for Becky. This is probably one for you, but just in terms of when will people start to see the output of some of the activities that you talked about at the start of this webinar?
Yeah, good point. I'm keen to get on and see some output from all of this work. And in fact, we've already seen some of the output on today's call. So obviously the Destination Nuclear work, the sector expert work, benefited from some funding January to March, which enabled us to get going more quickly on those schemes than we have on the others. That said, there are bits we're doing everything we can until the contract is actually signed, which then gets the money across and allows us to spend things. We're doing all the work behind the scenes, and we've developed accelerator programs for Rad Pro, welding, safety case, and another one that's just slipped my mind. Actually, I should know off. Project controls. Thank you. It's always the one I forget. Project controls and planning. Thank you, Lynn. So those are already sort of have been either worked up or actually are in delivery as in the pilot phase. So there's lots of bits of activity that have started, but we're expect to see an awful lot more as soon as we've got the funding through to enable more of this to happen, which should happen any day now.
Excellent. Thanks, Becky. I think we're just about there in terms of time and in terms of questions. I can't see a whole host of questions that we haven't answered, so I'll call it a day there. Just a reminder that the session will be recorded, and we'll send out a copy of that recording afterwards, along with a copy of the slide deck. We've put some links in the chat, so we'll send out. Make sure the links are in there, in all the portals and websites that have been mentioned. I'd like to thank our speakers for giving up their time today. Thanks very very much. I know it was a really sort of tough gig to do an overview in 10 minutes of quite a huge amount of activity that's going on. And then also we'll pop out a little survey as well alongside the notes, just to see how future topics we want to be covered in these sorts of type webinars, and frequency and all that sort of good stuff. Really, the more feedback we get, the better. But look, I'll with that in mind, I will leave you in peace and wish you a good day. Thanks very much. Cheers all.